Good day to you. It's Mari Westley, and I'm very glad to have you on this journey that we are taking to search for the truth. So I hope that you will be blessed with me. Good afternoon. It's Mari Westley here. We're going to continue with our search for truth. And the last time we got together, we ended with this. The house of Israel, or Ephraim, the divorced wife, was lost in the nations. But Yahweh never forgot the seed of Abraham. They are being restored in Yeshua back to the Father as firstfruits and firstborn. The house of Judah were never divorced by Yahweh. They looked on the house of Israel as unholy and unclean. To them it is unacceptable for the Father to accept them back into his household. Now we can understand what is written in Ezekiel 37, 1 to 23. This is where we are going to begin. The hand of Yahweh was upon me and carried me out in the spirit of Yahweh and set me down in the midst of the valley, which was full of bones, and caused me to pass by them round about, and behold, there were very many in the open valley, and lo, they were very dry. And he said unto me, Son of man, can these bones live? And I answered, O Lord, Adonai Yahweh, thou knowest. Again he said unto me, Prophesy upon these bones, and say unto them, O ye dry bones, hear the word of Yahweh. Thus saith Yahweh Elohim unto these bones, Behold, I will cause breath to enter into you, and you shall live. And I will lay sinews upon you, and bring flesh upon you, and cover you with skin, and put breath in you, and you shall live. And ye shall know that I am Yahweh. So I prophesied as I was commanded, and as I prophesied, there was a noise, and behold, a shaking, and the bones came together, bone to his bone. And when I beheld, lo, the sinews and the flesh came upon them, and the skin covered them above, but there was no breath in them. Then said he unto me, Prophesy unto the wind, prophesy, Son of man, and say to the wind, Thus says Yahweh Elohim, Come from the four winds, O breath, and breathe upon these slain, that they may live. So I prophesied as he commanded me, and the breath came into them, and they lived, and stood upon their feet, an exceeding great army. Then said unto me, Son of man, these bones are the whole house of Israel. He didn't say the whole nation of Israel. He said the whole house of Israel. Because Judah was still Judah. They were still in the land. It was the house of Israel that became lost in the nations. Behold, they say, our bones are dried and our hope is lost. We are cut off for our parts. Therefore prophesy and say unto them, Thus says Yahweh Elohim, Behold, O my people, I will open your graves and cause you to come up out of your graves and bring you into the land of Israel. And he shall know that I am Yahweh when I have opened your graves, O my people, and brought you up out of your graves. So here we see the third painting, the valley of dry bones. And shall put my spirit in you, and ye shall live, and I shall place you in your own land. Then shall you know that I, Yahweh, have spoken it and performed it, says Yahweh. The word of Yahweh came again unto me, saying, Moreover, thou son of man, take thee one stick and write upon it, for Judah and for the children of Israel his companions. Then take another stick and write upon it for Joseph, the stick of Ephraim, and for all the house of Israel his companions. and joined them one to another into one stick, and they shall become one in your hand. And when the children of thy people shall speak unto thee, saying, Wilt thou not show us what thou meanest by these? And then he says, Say unto them, Thus says Yahweh Elohim, Behold, I will take the stick of Joseph, which is in the hand of Ephraim, and the tribes of Israel his fellows, and will put them with him, even with the stick of Judah, and make them one stick, and they shall be one in my hand, and the sticks whereon thou writest shall be in thine hand before their eyes. And say unto them, Thus says Yahweh Elohim, Behold, I will take the children of Israel from among the heathen, whither they be gone, and will gather them on every side, and bring them back into their own land. And I will make them one nation in the land upon the mountains of Israel, and one king shall be king to them all. And there shall be no more two nations, neither shall they be divided into two kingdoms any more at all. Neither shall they defile themselves any more with their idols, nor with their detestable things, nor with any of their transgressions. But I will save them out of all their dwelling places, wherein they have sinned, and will cleanse them, and so shall they be my people. Ami. And I will be their Elohim. Jeremiah 31, 5-6 says, Thou shalt yet plant vines upon the mountains of Samaria. The planters shall plant and shall eat them as common things. Now remember, Samaria is Shomeron, and it means guardianship, watch station. And the root is shamar, to preserve, to observe, to protect, to watch over. For there shall be a day that the watchman upon the Mount Ephraim shall cry, Arise ye, and let us go up to Zion, unto Yahweh Eloheinu, Yahweh our God. There will be no division anymore, and all will be one nation again. All will recognize Jerusalem as the throne of Yahweh. Right, now we can more or less see, we must remember that Israel today is the house of Judah, and all those that added themselves onto Judah, and they became known as the house of Judah. But the house of Israel was integrated into the nations, and they became the Gentiles that we are speaking about here. So let's go to Hosea chapter 1 verse 10-11. Yet the number of the children of Israel shall be as the sand of the sea, which cannot be measured nor numbered. And it shall come to pass that in the place where it was said unto them, You are not my people, there it shall be said unto them, You are the sons of the living El High. Then shall the children of Judah and the children of Israel be gathered together, and appoint themselves one head, and they shall come up out of the land, for great shall be the day of Jezreel. Now let's continue with Jeremiah 31. So we're going to 7 and 9 and 15 to 19. For thus saith Yahweh, sing with gladness for Jacob and shout. That shout is an ear-splitting shout. An ear-splitting shout is the covenant shout. And he says, among the chief of the nations, publish ye, praise ye, and say, O Yahweh, save thy people, the remnant of Israel. Behold, I will bring them from the north country, and gather them from the coasts of the earth, and with them the blind and the lame, the woman with child, and her that travaileth with child together. A great company shall return thither. They shall come with weeping, and with supplications will I lead them. I will cause them to walk by the rivers of waters in a straight way, wherein they shall not stumble. For I am a father to Israel, and Ephraim is my firstborn. So what is he saying here? He says, I'm a father to the nation of Israel, and Ephraim, the house of Israel in the nations, is my firstborn. So he is the one that chooses the firstborn. Remember the changeover from Jacob and Esau? Esau was the firstborn, but God took away the firstborn rights and he gave it to Jacob. And we are from Jacob. Thus saith Yahweh, a voice was heard in Ramah, lamentation and bitter weeping. Rachel, weeping for her children, refused to be comforted for her children because they were not. Thus says Yahweh, refrain thy voice from weeping and thine eyes from tears, for thy work shall be rewarded, says Yahweh, and they shall come again from the land of the enemy. And there is hope in thine end, says Yahweh, that thy children shall come again to their own border, to bring back home again, convert, deliver again, and restore the apostate ones. Verse 18 says, I have surely heard Ephraim bemoaning himself. Thus thou hast chastised me, and I was chastised. And as a bullock unaccustomed to the yoke, turn thou me, and I shall be turned. For thou art Yahweh my God, Yahweh Elohai. Surely after that I was turned. I repented, and after that I was instructed. I smote upon my thigh. I was ashamed, yea, even confounded, because I did bear the reproach of my youth. Reproach is chapa, and it means shame, rebuke. Turned is repented, and shuv is returned to the starting point. Here Rachel, the mother of Joseph, Ephraim, Manasseh, and Benjamin, might be considered to be the mother of the whole of Israel. Benjamin representing the southern kingdom of Judah, and Ephraim the northern kingdom. Rachel had pined for children all her life and died in sorrow when Benjamin was born. Remember, she called him Benoni. This is my hometown, son of my sorrow. Genesis 35:18-19 says, that Jacob straightway named him Benjamin, son of my right hand, and she was buried at Ramah. Here she is representing as weeping for her children, then being comforted by the promise of restoration of all Israel under the Messiah. Her offspring is to come forth from among the nations, and all will have a hope and a future in the latter days. Someday they shall come again to their own borders. Jeremiah 31:31-34 says, Behold, the days come, says Yahweh, that I will make a new covenant with the house of Israel and with the house of Judah, not according to the covenant that I made with their fathers in the day that I took them by the hand, to bring them out of the land of Egypt, which my covenant they break, although I was an husband unto them, says Yahweh. So here you can see that the first covenant, the Moses covenant, is the marriage covenant. Although I was a husband unto them, says Yahweh, but this shall be the covenant that I will make with the house of Israel after those days, says Yahweh. I will put my Torah in their inward parts and write it in their hearts, and will be their God, Elohim, and they shall be my people. And they shall teach no more every man his neighbor, and every man his brother, saying, Know Yahweh, for they shall all know me, from the least of them unto the greatest of them, saith Yahweh, for I will forgive their iniquity, and I will remember their sin no more. Now, where have we seen this? We saw it through Paul the evangelist to Gentiles, and he quoted the above scriptures in Hebrews 8:10-12. Yahweh only mentions the house of Israel here in the last part of verse 10. Then in verse 12, he said that he will put his Torah in the inward parts and write it on their hearts, and they will be my people, are me. Those that have the Torah in their hearts, it will become his people. And he will be their God. In Hebrew, there is a word Yahweh used here that only a father would speak with a family member or to a son or daughter, is the word Bekirbi. But this word that we have here is Bekirbam. Be is in, the middle part of the word is Karev, near at hand, near his heart, kinsfolk, son or daughter, and the root is Korban, to draw near. The last two letters, A-M, means his people. Me, my people, is the one that's got the Torah written on their hearts and in their minds. Remember that the house of Israel, the nation of Israel, tried to keep the Torah, but they just couldn't. He only mentioned the house of Israel here because the house of Judah will only receive Yeshua as kinsman redeemer when they call on him on the day of Yahweh during the tribulation. Here the Holy Spirit was expected. Up to then he was in the heavens. It was Shavuot. 120 believers in Yeshua were gathered together in one of the courts of the temple after his resurrection. Ami, my people, numeric value is 120. They were Abraham's offspring. And when the day of Pentecost, Shavuot, was fully come, they were all with one accord in one place, and suddenly there came a sound from heaven as of a rushing mighty wind, the Ruach Hakodesh, and it filled all the house where they were sitting. And there appeared unto them cloven tongues like as of fire, and it sat upon each of them. And they were all filled with the Holy Spirit, and began to speak with other tongues as the Spirit gave them utterance. For this very first time, the Ruach HaKodesh is now living in the believer's heart. He's come down to the earth. Psalm 29:7 says, the voice of Yahweh divides the flames of fire. And here Yahweh shows that his timing is perfect. We think of changing days and months and all that, but I'll tell you, when you go according to Yahweh's timeline, it is always perfect. This was exactly 2,000 years later, after the very first Pesach. Yeshua became the perfect Pesach, a willing sin offering on the altar of Yahweh on behalf of Israel as a nation. 2,000 years before, the Torah's 10 commandments were spoken and given from Mount Sinai as a marriage covenant. For 2,000 years, Israel had to celebrate every Passover. They had to learn about Passover. They had to remember it. They would remember the blood on the doorways of their homes. But when they entered the promised land, the first day after Passover, they had to bring a sheaf of first fruit of the barley harvest to the priest to wave it as a wave offering before Yahweh, to be accepted for you, the Bible says. Also an unblemished lamb to be offered as a burnt offering, and a flour with oil offering. Israel regarded the Passover and the Feast of First Fruits 50 days later as one long feast. And after bringing that wave offering, etc., they had to count 7 Sabbaths. Yeah, God is on the timeline again. 50 days. Then they had to bring 2 loaves of bread baked with yeast as a wave offering before Yahweh, and will be the first fruit wave offering unto him. And this day will be a holy convocation to you. In other words, a Sabbath, a statute throughout all your generations. And these days of waiting were called the days of the counting of the Omer, the barley sheaf. I believe that the 2 loaves represent 2 lots of people, yet with sin in them. And the first loaf of bread, I believe all believers in Yeshua, chosen as first fruits from the wheat harvest. The second loaf of bread is the 140,000 Israelis, chosen from all the tribes of Israel, except from the tribe of Dan. See the lecture on the Feast of First Fruit. Now, we've been told that leaven is the symbol of sin. And these loaves were baked with leaven, and yet are the first fruits unto Yahweh. Now, wheat is chita, and the numeric value is 22, and is related to the word. In other words, the Aleph Beit, the 22 letters of the Hebrew alphabet. Yahweh's goodness is Tovah, and the numeric value is 22. The living Torah is the Torah Chaim. Numeric value is 679. And when I added those letters together, the 679, I found it's 22. And only Yahweh could have arranged the word like this. We know that the Hebrews believe that Shavuot was singled out by the sages as the holiest day in Jewish history, because that is the time when the Torah was given. It was the marriage covenant. Shavuot is the feast of first fruit of the 50th day after Passover, and in the Greek it is Pentecost. The Torah was given to Israel on this day after 50 days of preparation to receive the Torah. Included was the marriage covenant. It's amazing how everything falls in place. How Yeshua is related to each feast, and it speaks about what he does, what he's going to do at each feast. Now here, 2,000 years later, the person of the Ruach Elohim came down onto the 120 believers in Yeshua in one of the temple courts where they were gathered together. Remember, the 120 is Ami, my people. They've got the Torah written on their hearts and in their mind. The baptism in the Ruach Hakodesh and his power was promised to the seed of Israel in the first covenant, and now the renewed covenant was inaugurated on exactly the same day, joining them together. The Torah showed us our sin, and the Ruach HaKodesh gave us his power to resist sin and to do the commandments of Yahweh. 3,000 people died that sinned with the golden calf that day when the first covenant was instituted. And 3,000 people came into life on that day when they accepted Yeshua as Savior, when the renewed covenant was instituted. The Ruach HaKodesh sent from Yahweh is now dwelling in us. We only have to ask for his wisdom. He is our teacher, our advisor, our comforter and advocate. And he teaches us all about Yeshua, who is the Shekhinah, the outshining of Yahweh. The marriage vows are now renewed in us. Hebrews 8:6-13 says, But now hath he obtained a more excellent ministry, by how much also he is the mediator of a better covenant, which was established upon the better promises, which is absolutely true. For if that first covenant, in italics, it should be priesthood, because I explained all this in the lecture on the tabernacle of Moses, but I felt I had to re-implement it here, but only not in the wholeness that I did over there in the tabernacle of Moses. For if that first covenant, it should be priesthood, had been faultless, then should no place have been sought for the second. Speaking about the priesthood. For finding fault with them, he says, the priesthood, he says, behold, the days come, says Yahweh, when I will make a new covenant with the house of Israel and with the house of Judah, not according to the covenant that I made with their fathers in the day when I took them by the hand to lead them out of the land of Egypt, because they continued not in my covenant, and I regarded them not, says Yahweh. For this is the covenant that I will make with the house of Israel after those days, says Yahweh. I will put my laws, my Torah, into their mind and write them in their hearts, and I will be to them Elohim, and they shall be to me a people. They will become Ami. Now we can understand why Yahweh is only repeating only the name of the house of Israel here, because they are his people now already. And they shall not teach every man his neighbor and every man his brother, saying, Know Yahweh, for all shall know me, from the least to the greatest. For I will be merciful to their unrighteousness, and their sins and iniquities will I remember no more. Remember, this was exactly that was said in Jeremiah 31. In that he saith a new covenant, here we have the italics again, so it should be priesthood. He hath made the first old. The first priesthood he made old. Now that which decayeth and waxes old is ready to vanish away. Now, let's go to Hebrews 7 verse 12. For the priesthood being changed, there is made of necessity a change of the Torah. But here he says it was the priesthood that was going to be changed. Oh my goodness. The Torah, now written on our hearts and minds, will be different. Why? Because it will be printed on our hearts without the judgments of the Torah. Now, through these mistakes by interpreters, Satan blinded the eyes of the believers in Yeshua to believe that it was the covenant of Moses, the marriage covenant, that was decayed and abolished. I want you to go back and see everything in the tabernacle of Moses. Yeshua said in John 14, verse 1 to 3, Let not your heart be troubled. You believe in Elohim, believe also in me. In my Father's house are many mansions. If it were not so, I would have told you. I go to prepare a place for you. And if I go and prepare a place for you, I will come again and receive you unto myself, that where I am, there ye may be also, for the consummation of the marriage feast that was installed on Mount Sinai. James 1:18 says, Of his own will begat he us with the word of truth, that we should be a kind of the first fruits of his creatures. In the Hebrew, it says, first fruits of his creatures in Hebrew is Reshit B'chorei Yitzhurayiv. There is no of a kind there, or as a kind of. You are chosen as first fruits. 1 Corinthians 6:19-20 says, What, know ye not that your body is the temple, the Echal of the Ruach Hakodesh, which is in you, which you have of Elohim, that you are not your own? For you are bought with a price. Therefore glorify Elohim in your body and in your spirit, which are Elohim's. Remember that blood was applied to the ears, hands, and feet of the first priest in the first covenant, and it signified that all the bodily members and soul and spirit faculties of the priests were to be consecrated to Yahweh and to his service, the hearing, the working, and the walking, to hear and obey him and his Torah in all his ways. But in Malachi 2:8-10 says, But ye are departed out of the way. You have caused many to stumble at the Torah. You have corrupted the covenant of Levi, says Yahweh of hosts. Therefore have I also made you contemptible and base before all the people, according as you have not kept my ways, but have been partial in the Torah, or the law. Yet it says specifically it was the priesthood that was corrupted. And so decayeth and palahu, which they used for the decayed covenant, is to make worn out, declare obsolete. It wasn't the Torah and the covenant of Moses, as was said in Hebrews 8:13, and vanish away of a mitzvah, to render unapparent, corrupt. Now I'm glad I made it quite clear, very much more clearer than what I said on the tabernacle of Moses. After the resurrection of Yeshua, we see the new living temple of Yahweh revealed, and his new priesthood, and the high priest Melchizedek of the renewed blood covenant. They were filled with the power of the Ruach HaKodesh. Now they have the power of God within them to resist Satan and to say no to sin, to be overcomers. The Ruach HaKodesh also wrote the Torah on their hearts and minds without the judgments. Since then he is dwelling within the believers' hearts. Now they can keep the Torah and do what it says. And of course all the believers that will come afterwards. Now Zechariah 2:10-12 says, Sing and rejoice, O daughter of Zion, for lo, I come, and I will dwell in the midst of thee, says Yahweh. And many nations shall be joined to Yahweh in that day, and shall be my people, me, those that have the Torah written on their hearts. And I will dwell in the midst of thee, and thou shalt know that the Lord of hosts, Yahweh Tzavaoth, hath sent me unto you. And Yahweh shall inherit Judah, his portion, in the Holy Land, and shall choose Jerusalem again. Revelation 22:16 says, I, Yeshua, have sent mine angel to testify unto you these things in the churches. I am the root and the offspring of David, and the bright and morning star. Yeshua is both the root and the branch of Israel's olive tree. He is the life source of the olive tree that would preserve all Israel. Now the olive tree is tzayit ha'etz, as yielding illuminating oil to give light to see. Numbers, the numeric value is 582. Add together the 582, it's 15. The numeric value of Yah. And the fifth letter of Aleph Beit is Hey, Yahweh's breath. 8 is Chet, and the 8th letter is new life and new beginnings. And the second letter is Beit, house, also represents Yeshua. These letters together we have the word in Strong's 247 is Hava, to hide self. Also Strong's 2245, Chavav, to hide in bosom, to cherish, to love. Chava was the right hand of Adam to rule, to have dominion together, because of the covenant with Abraham, his offspring through Yitzchak, or Isaac. Israel and all believers in Yeshua were chosen in him from before the foundation of the world to be his right hand, to be co-ruler with him in the world to come. Because we are his people, his own. John 2:18-19 says, Then answered the Jews and said to him, it wasn't really the Jews, it was the priesthood, and said unto him, What sign showest thou unto us, seeing that thou doest these things? And Yeshua answered and said unto them, Destroy this temple, he's saying the sanctuary of his body, and in 3 days I will raise it up. I think we've got to stop here and continue next time when we get together again. There's a lot to think about, there's a lot to study, to go and look up all the scriptures what I have mentioned, and will God even reveal to you more than maybe that he revealed to me. So I bless you in the name of Yeshua HaMashiach. Bye-bye for now. Thank you for joining me today on today's journey. I hope you will join me again next time. So, shalom for today until I see you again.